Why don't the pros use GarageBand? The vast majority of those in this community are professional musicians. Why? Because if you've taken my advice and you've released your music to Spotify and Apple Music and all the places using DistroKid, you're getting paid some royalties. And when you have that first 1 cent of royalties from your music, guess what? You've been paid for your music and you are now a professional musician. Why don't experienced music creators use GarageBand would probably be a better way to look at it. Look, I am biased. I'm going to say a lot of things that are in my opinion and in my experience. And the thing is that a lot of people that are pros that don't record in GarageBand are also biased. So there's a lot of biases going on. The first thing that came to my mind with GarageBand is perception. Ever since 2004, where John Mayer and Steve Jobs got up on stage, and one of the first things Steve Jobs said when he announced GarageBand was, it's the music creation software for non-musicians. And we've called it GarageBand. Now, those two things in tandem, these days you think, oh, that didn't really mean much, but trust me, that meant a lot. When you were watching that at the time, it was like, oh, I even remember, I wasn't even an Apple user at the time, and I remember finding out about this GarageBand thing, and I'm like, oh, yeah, GarageBand, like hacking around in the garage with your mates, and yeah, not really taking it seriously. So the name is often a problem. And the perception that it is a toy, it is for amateurs and beginners, it is not for professionals to use. Number two on my why pros don't use GarageBand is hardware support. So especially for the iOS version, and by the way, I should have defined, we're talking Mac and iOS here because, I mean, iOS probably suffers even more. So if you're using a GarageBand Mac versus Logic Mac, there's a difference, but it's not a big gap. As soon as people think, oh, you're doing it on your phone or your tablet, you come kind of crazy person. Yeah. So hardware support is something that a lot of people worry about. And look, to a certain extent, this is true because GarageBand doesn't support, especially on iOS, it doesn't support a lot of really high-end interfaces. So I guess if you're a professional and you wanted to run like a Firewire interface from back in the day, like an 8-channel or 16-channel Firewire interface, that's not going to work. Anything that requires a driver that's not got a class compliant mode is not going to work, at least on iPad. And GarageBand itself doesn't have great support for, it's got a little basic MIDI learn stuff on the Mac, but on iPad, you got no MIDI learn, you got no ability to program things in. It's all very basic and very straightforward. Which leads nicely into number three, which is plugin support. So a lot of people say, I don't want to use GarageBand because it doesn't support a lot of the high-end plugins that I use, the sample libraries that I use. If you're doing big symphony work and you're using big libraries, terabytes and terabytes of sounds, GarageBand's not the best at managing those, even on the Mac. And on iOS, it is an absolute nightmare to manage that, to be perfectly honest. As much as I love GarageBand, as much as I'm biased towards it, the fact that you've got this one folder that you store any files that you want to bring in and out, you can't separate them out into different folders. Yeah, that's a challenge. The fact that you can only use AUV3 plugins and Interapp Audio, you can't use any AAX, you can't use any VSTs, that's obviously a problem. So, yeah, professionals that use a lot of plugins and rely on those plugins to create their music, yeah, they're going to need something more than GarageBand. Number four, the mixer. But yeah, when you're mixing here in GarageBand, you're flying blind, aren't you? So you've got your drums here. What level are these at? We don't know. They're at about 3/4. And when you turn things up and down, you don't get a really clear view of that. You've got no master meter, so you can't see what's going on here. Now, GarageBand on Mac is a little better. You've got a little bit more control, but you still don't have a really nice mixer interface. If you look at something like Logic Pro, especially because a lot of professionals have used both digital audio workstations and real gear, they're used to a view that looks more like this. That is a selection of channels with channel strips, with faders, with buses, with sends and receives, and that's what they want to use to create their music. They want to be able to have a mixer. So the reason that, again, professionals care about this more than someone that's just starting out is a lot of people don't even think about this. A lot of people that are just happy creating in GarageBand, you don't know what you don't have, right? So you don't know what you're not missing. If you've never used a console, if you've never used a hardware mixer, it doesn't actually matter to you, and you can still balance out your sounds here. There's also hacks and workarounds and ways to do this. You can use the EQ volume hack. You can use automation. The thing about GarageBand is there are ways to do things, but it's just a little bit clunkier. I alluded to it there, but GarageBand itself doesn't have buses and sends, so sends and receives. It has a kind of workaround for things like delay and reverb. So if you've used GarageBand, you'll know that as well as your track effects, you've also got these master effects. So you can set up one reverb and one delay bus for everything. So you just set it here and set it here, and it's kind of like having a couple of auxiliary channels that you can then send a certain amount of your delay or your echo and your reverb to that channel. If you compare that to something like Logic Pro or a more high-level DAW, you can see here I can set up multiple buses. I've only got 2 on here anyway because I'm, again, a bit basic. So yeah, you can send a little bit of a bunch of tracks to those buses and it works. Compatibility is a big one. So being compatible with other people, and the reason I mention this is not only compatibility for you and your work, but cross-compatibility. So someone mentioned before that, going into a quote-unquote real studio costs a lot of coin, and it does. Yet if you sort of worked on some stuff and you've got some synth patches and pads and things that you wanted to bring into a project, if you've already got a Pro Tools project with all those stems, with all your settings, with all your plugins, you can zip that sucker up, throw it on a disc, take it into the studio, hand it to the engineer. They can load it up, and in a couple of seconds, they've got everything exactly as you had it when you were writing your demo. And then you can go ahead and start tracking and recording. If you've used GarageBand, yeah, look, again, there's ways, there's workarounds. You can stem them out, you can export them all as WAV files, and then bring them all back in. But it's just not as convenient as having. And that's why industry standards exist. Pro Tools is an industry standard, kind of always has been in the digital realm, and probably always will be. The hand holding in GarageBand. This is what a lot of people say to me that they aren't a fan of. I kind of am a fan of this. I've been on record as saying this, that I love that in GarageBand, when you want to add a piano track, you come here to the big keyboard and you tap on the big keyboard and you're immediately playing a keyboard. I kind of love that. I know a lot of people don't. I love that I can hit the big red record button up the top here and I'm recording. And everything is just simple and it's there. And that's all there is to it. You don't have to arm tracks. You don't have to think about your inputs and your outputs. You don't have to think about your monitoring setup. You literally just go, I think this needs some guitar. So you tap the big button and you press guitar, or you press drums, or you press synth, or you press strings, or you press bass. Whatever you want to do. Like I want some Koto in this sucker. Familiarity. So being familiar with something is really important. And a lot of folks who are professionals, we're talking professional engineers here and professional producers, if you went to music school and you learned how to music, you musicked on Pro Tools. You didn't music on Logic Pro. You didn't music on GarageBand. You might have in your spare time in your back room, but at school you were learning Pro Tools. And that's, again, why a lot of professionals these days are using Pro Tools, because they learnt on Pro Tools, they studied Pro Tools. That's what was used in their classes and in their schools. And then when they got out into the real world and went to intern at a real studio, guess what? They had a big Pro Tools rig there. Quality. The quality question. So it's kind of related to the perception, but a lot of people think that the quality of the music that you produce in GarageBand is inferior. Now, this has a little bit of truth to it. The reason I say that is that GarageBand originally, both on Mac and iOS, was 44.1 kilohertz 16-bit audio. They only updated to 24-bit on the Mac, I think, around the early 2010s, and on iOS in around 2018. So it was actually inferior quality audio. It had a lower sampling rate. And on iOS, for GarageBand, you can still only set it to 44.1 kilohertz, 24-bit sampling rate. So you don't have the opportunity to increase that. Now, Remember, CDs are 44.1 kilohertz 16-bit. And if you're old school like me, you think that CDs sound just fine. I'm pretty happy with the quality. So I'm not running out there to get 192 kilohertz sampling rates and 32-bit floating point and therefore giant file sizes because I don't really think it's required. It's not a requirement, not a prerequisite for the sort of music. But if you do want that, if you're an absolute audiophile, I get it. Maybe you want Pro Tools, or maybe you want to use Logic Pro or something more high end because you want to have that higher quality audio. What I hear more than anything is someone that's using their Focusrite Scarlett 2i2, plugging that into a Pro Tools rig and thinking they're going to get better sound than plugging that same Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 into an iPad or an iPhone or a Mac. And again, it's digital. So it's doing an analog to digital conversion. It's taking your analog signal and it's converting it into ones and zeros that your computer or your device can understand, and then it's playing those back to you. Now, there's a little bit of truth to that some of the playback engines might be enhanced or might do different things in other DAWs, but for the most part, it's ones and zeros. It's numbers. It's just computer code. Once you have a digital wave file that you've created, it all comes down to the quality of your converters, the analog to digital converters, and the preamp that you're using, and then it's digital. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, folks. So yeah, if you're getting some value or just having some fun chatting GarageBand with me, throw the thumbs up our way. The final thing I wanted to talk about this is reputation. Now, this is a fun one. I do a little bit of work, mixing and mastering and producing work. And a lot of it I do in GarageBand. And a lot of my community, a lot of the people that would actually hire me to do producing and to mixing and help them with their songs were in GarageBand too. So it was no big deal. But I have come across some folks that have heard my music or that know what I do, and then they just have this assumption that, oh yeah, I know you use GarageBand on your channel, but you don't really use that for real music. Like they assume that this is like a facade, and I've actually I pull back a curtain and there's like a Pro Tools rig with a Mac Pro in the corner. That's not the case. So I have had people that have said, oh, can you do this? And I'm like, yeah, I use GarageBand. And they're like, wait, what? You use GarageBand? Oh, no, then don't worry about it then. I want a professional sound. I don't want GarageBand. If you're not going to use a professional DAW, then I don't want to work with you. So yeah, there's definitely a reputation thing, and especially if someone walks in and you're rocking GarageBand on an iPad, people are like, wait a minute,